Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of an all-new podcast hosted by the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union. My name is Tom Florian, Head of Marketing and Creative Services with the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union, and I'll serve as your host of this podcast. I'm a graduate of Drake University, where I received my bachelor's degree in marketing and finance, as well as an MBA with a focus in marketing. I'm originally from neighboring state Illinois, Western Springs specifically, a small southwest suburb about 20 minutes from downtown Chicago. I'm also a former high school athlete myself. My co-host for this podcast will be Meredith Cunningham. She's an Iowa girl who graduated from Knoxville High School, was a standout volleyball and basketball athlete. She went on to compete at Simpson College. She also completed her degree in business management and sport administration before going on to receive her master's in sport business from St. Leo University in Tampa, Florida. Now let's welcome in Meredith, who will provide some more detail on what you, the listener, can expect from this podcast, as well as the rundown for today's episode. Meredith, welcome.
Thanks, Tom. Excited to be here as we launch this new platform for the Girls Union. As an Iowa girl, I look forward to exploring the history of the Girls Athletic Union, hosting interviews with athletes and coaches, checking in with former athletes to see what they're doing now, sharing health and wellness tips from interviews with health professionals, and so much more. Our goal for this podcast is to highlight the Iowa girl and everything she does, and to share information that builds her up.
And to kick things off, we're going to dive right into the history of the IGHSAU, correct?
That's right. Earlier this week, I had the opportunity to sit down with your colleague, Jason Eslinger of the IGHSAU, and longtime sportswriter, Chuck Schoffner. We talked a lot about the history of the union and the challenges they face, and then where we think we might be going in the future.
Well, I can't wait to hear more, Meredith. Those are two phenomenal historical minds, and I'm sure the conversation was full of unique stories and perspectives. But before we get to Meredith's interview with Chuck and Jason, we're going to take our first break. We hope you'll stay with us as we'll have Meredith's interview with Jason Eslinger and Chuck Schoffner right after this. You're listening to the inaugural episode of the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union's new podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Central College. Central College has a new tuition price of just $18,600. That means the college experience that opens doors for a lifetime is now more affordable than ever, and scholarships are still available. Apply today at central.edu. And by IMT Insurance. Serving Iowans since 1884, you can be worry-free with IMT. Learn more at imtins.com.
How do you define strength? Is it physical? Or is it mental? Maybe it's both. Maybe it's whatever empowers a person to dig deeper, fight harder, and overcome obstacles that once seemed insurmountable. Discover how much stronger and more confident your children can be. Encourage them to participate in a sport when they go to high school.
This message presented by the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union and the Iowa High School Athletic Directors Association.
Welcome back to the all-new Girls Union podcast. I'm co-host Meredith Cunningham, and in today's episode, we take a closer look into the history of the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union, how it was founded, the legacy of Dr. E. Wayne Cooley, and what the future of the organization might look like. And to talk to those ideas and more, I'd like to welcome on our two guests for today. First, he's been with the IGHSAU for over 20 years as a sport administrator and head of media relations and Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union communications. He also serves as the Girls Union main record keeper. He's a Grundy Center native and now resides in Prairie City with his wife and two sons. Joining me is Jason Eslinger, and our second guest is longtime sports writer for the Associated Press and United Press International, Chuck Schoffner. He's recently worked with the Des Moines Register, Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union, and Iowa Farm Bureau Federation, and a number of projects. Continues to assist the Drake Relay Sports Information Team and is currently conducting research for a book centered on the Iowa State women's basketball team and its rise to prominence under Coach Bill Fenley. A native of Liam, Ohio, Chuck graduated from Drake University in Des Moines. He and his wife Pam now reside in Ankeny. Additionally, Chuck is the 2009 recipient of the Mel Greenberg Media Award for the Women's College Basketball Coaches Association. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Meredith, for including me in this.
Of course. So just going to jump right into it. And kind of the first thing that I wanted to talk about, many people do not know that the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union was founded during an impromptu meeting in the basement of the Central Presbyterian Church. Can you give us some background on how that transpired?
Well, at the time, in the early years of girls basketball, it was part of the Iowa High School Athletic Association. And a feeling was growing that basketball competition wasn't good for girls. Too strenuous, it wasn't healthy. And so they were going to no longer sponsor girls basketball. Well, a group of superintendents, administrators from some small schools got together after one of them, John W. Agans from Mystic, stood up at this meeting of school administrators, says, "Gentlemen, if you attempt to do away with girls basketball, you'll be standing at the center of the track when the train runs over you." And basically what it's saying is that we're going to have girls basketball, and it's going to be a big thing, and you can either get on board or get out of the way. And so Mr. Agans and about 25 and 20, a couple dozen other administrators got together and decided and formed an organization that was going to oversee girls basketball and promote girls basketball, and that became the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union.
I think one of the things to look at is, at the time, the Iowa High School Athletic Association, or the Boys Association, at the time was under leadership from the National Federation of High Schools, which actually they still are. We still use their rules, and the Girls Athletic Union are partial members of that group. And the overriding philosophy was that the girls basketball was a health risk to young women, and there were even coaches, one coach in particular at that meeting that Chuck talked about said, "I can't in good conscience coach these young ladies because I am so scared of the damage that we may be doing to them." So it was a pretty hotly contested debate, and a lot of different sides on that. And the association decided to follow, because they were bound by NFHS rules, that they had to discontinue girls basketball. So there was a little bit of that kind of basically forcing schools to get rid of girls basketball, and that's how the Girls Athletic Union, starting a group like the IGHSAU, basically was saying, well, we'll make our own rules. If we're not bound by National Federation rules, then we'll start our own.
Yeah, just an incredible story there. So after the Girls Union was formed, we obviously had our two kind of split organizations. How did the Girls Union differ from the boys at the time? I know, Jason, you had just kind of touched on how they were not bound by the National High School Federation.
I think that's the biggest thing, is they basically could make their own rule books, and they did. I mean, IGHSAU wrote their own rule books as far as playing girls basketball, and it gave them the freedom to basically set up a group to administrate the game the way they would, to have the game, I guess, for starters, for sure, and come up with their own set of different rules, and they could change it how they wanted to, obviously, and go about having a girls tournament.
And those rules, right now we're talking about basketball because this is the sport, the only sport that was available at the time, and those rules even changed through the years. It was once a 3-court game, is what you think of the 6-on-6 game, but it was actually played in 3-court because there was a middle court where those players just there were a couple players as centers who just stayed right there. And their idea was to get the ball from the guards down to the forwards and vice versa. And so, and then of course it then evolved into the 3-on-3 half-court game, that it became. So, but they were free. The organization, the girls' union, was free to do that and free to promote the sport the way they wanted. And that time there actually was not an executive director, as you recall, Jason. You remember there were I think 4 districts and then district representatives, and they took turns kind of in the role of part-time as a part-time director.
So it sounds like the early years were not easy by any means. Can you speak to some of the challenges the girls' union faced, especially those related to the separation from the athletic association?
Well, I think there was probably always a financial challenge of funding your state program, funding your state tournament, and funding the program at the individual schools. But these were all small schools playing at the time. The schools in the larger cities weren't playing girls basketball, and so but they did gain a lot of community support. I mean, way back in the early years, the team from Northwest Iowa, Correctionville, was his first state champion. Didn't they? They had to raise money on their own to ride the train to Des Moines, and then they took a 2-day train ride to get to Des Moines so they could play in the state tournament. But and then there was just I would think the continued idea of acceptance of girls playing basketball, because as we heard, as we discussed before here, that the feeling that it was unhealthy and it wasn't right, and then girls could injure themselves more easily playing basketball. I think you still had, I'm sure some of that perception still lingered until eventually, people would watch and say, hey, these girls are pretty good, they can play. And so I think you were dealing with that for a while.
And I think the other biggest financial challenge going forward too was, we talked about originally when the Girls Athletic Union was set up, there was no executive director at first. Well, there was one that was hired eventually, and Rod Chisholm was his name. And I think one of the biggest financial challenges that came out of that was there was a bit of a scandal. It almost led to the end of the girls' union until he eventually, Mr. Chisholm, actually resigned in 1954, I believe it was. And then, so I think that was a huge challenge that almost ended the IGHSAU.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Chuck.
No, and then perhaps you were getting to this, Meredith. That resignation led to the hiring of Ewing Cooley as the executive director, and that changed everything. So I'll throw it back to you, and maybe how you want to get us in maybe into that topic.
Yeah. So first, kind of before we segue over there, Chuck, you mentioned the train ride and the girls hopping on a train ride for a 2-day journey. That is just incredible to think about. I hadn't even considered that perspective and traveling to the state tournament. And one thing that we all know that Ewing Cooley did is he absolutely transformed the girls' state basketball tournament and made it into an event that people from all across the state would travel to. Can you talk a little bit about what he did in the notoriety of the Iowa Girls State Tournament?
Well, your term was exactly right. He made it an event, and he helped, and he made it more than a sporting event. He saw, particularly, they moved into Betts Auditorium right almost a year or so after he took over, and that's a lot of seats to fill. And so maybe you weren't going to do that all with basketball fans, but you could do it if you had entertainment. You have dance acts, and this has been evolved into the big show with the flags, on the final night, and you'd brought on the Parade of Champions of honoring all the state champions in all the sports, which you do that, and then there's ticket buyers for each one of those people, each one of those performers, each one of those people that march across the floor. And so it became an extravaganza, and he developed a TV network, and thousands of people in the states around could see this, and see these sellout crowds in a large auditorium. He kind of brought a showmanship vibe to the job, and really turned it into something fantastic, and something that that a girl playing in it could realize, gosh, we're important. This is a really big event, and this is a privilege for us to be here.
I would agree with Chuck on that Dr. Cooley was, first and foremost, he was a businessman, and he knew he needed to fill seats. He did a great job with that, as far as he wanted to make sure that the state tournament was an event for everyone, that even if you weren't a basketball fan, you could go to the games and support your teams, but there'd be something there for you to enjoy watching, whether it was, like I said, the halftime shows. And the other thing he really did that I think was really ingenious is those halftime shows consisted of Iowa girls, or Iowa kids that were maybe, whether it was a dance team or whether it was some kind of show, and it consisted of Iowa high school kids. So you were getting a lot of bang for your buck at that time, and he was very, very, very smart, and I think that led to the creation of the other programs that he would later bring about, as far as other sports, and expanding the girls' athletic union's role for giving kids more means to participate through other activities.
Dr. Cooley definitely transformed the union, and like you said, he was a businessman, and that money that he helped bring in helped expand the union and provide other opportunities in other sports. It's kind of something you had just touched on, Jason, which was our next little segue, is the Iowa Girl. And Chuck talked about how it was a privilege to play in the state tournament, and how girls there playing felt important. Can you talk a little bit about, or maybe explain to our listeners, what the Iowa Girl is and how Dr. Cooley cultivated that?
As far as the Iowa Girl, I think Dr. Cooley's mission, I think once he realized and got the girls athletic union on its feet from a financial standpoint, was basically he wanted to give more opportunities for the Iowa Girl athlete. He wanted to give them the same opportunities through other activities, and that's where he began the other activities, such as starting tennis and golf in 1956. He started those programs. Then he started track and field right around that same time. And track and field actually was his favorite sport. If you were to pin him down and ask him, he loved track and field, and did a lot of amazing opportunities as far as getting the girls not only a state track meet, but getting them a presence at the Drake relays and showing what they could do in that regard. And his ultimate goal was, he wanted, as we've talked about earlier, to make the Iowa Girl special, to make the female athlete stand, in his words, just as tall as the Iowa male athlete. And that was a very big part of his mission, was to explore different opportunities to have an event where they feel like they are the queens of the state. And he was really good about that, whether it was the state basketball tournament, whether it was, getting things televised. Iowa basketball was televised in 9 different states, and it started in 1951 or 52, and if you look at when other sports in the United States were televised, NFL games really weren't a big presence on television until 1956. The NBA Finals weren't even live on TV until the early 80s. So he was very revolutionary in getting the word out about the Iowa girl athlete, and that's where the sold out Vets Auditorium and the exciting teams and the exciting games that happen. I mean, that was all under his watch, and again, it was able to expand on that and make it was an event to be a girl competing in a state tournament, not just in basketball, but later through track and field, Drake relays, golf and tennis, and obviously later sports later on through his tenure.
Well, and it allowed the athletes, regardless of their skill level or how good their team was, that what they were doing was important. That you had an organization behind them that was going to do everything they could to make this a great experience throughout your high school career. Whether you made the state tournament or not, you were going to have a great. They're going to see to it that you have a great experience. And because it was important, I was just thinking, maybe some of our great basketball players like Denise Long and Jeanette Olson, because it was important, I think perhaps that spurred them to work, to become the type of players they were. If it wasn't such a big deal, would they have done it? I don't know. They might have still been pretty good players, but would they have been as good as they had been? Would these players be shoveling snow off the courts in the winter so they could shoot? To go outside to put up a hoop in the barn or whatever, or to run around a country block, which because they knew that they could showcase, they would be showcased, and if they worked hard at it, then the better they would be, because it was important and it was worth pursuing.
We've touched a little bit on the Iowa girl and the importance of that term. Share with us what you feel symbolizes that term.
Community spirit, making sure that you represent your school, your community, your state in the best way possible, and then going back to where we said that you would have the resources and the support to be able to do that. You and Jason grew up in a state where there was always girls athletics. When I went to high school, I was a couple of years in Ohio and then a couple of years in Indiana. There were no girls sports. And I'm embarrassed now to look back on that in a way, because, in high school, you're kind of self-absorbed and I'm just worrying about playing ball and doing well in school and listening to music. Now, many would say I haven't come very far because I'm still listening to the same music, but I didn't even think that the girls in our class would even want to play. I never thought that they shouldn't play, but it didn't even dawn on me that maybe they would have liked to play and be on a school team and represent their school like we were. We didn't always do it very well on the basketball court, but we tried. And then I come out here to go to Drake and see that, holy smoke, not only what a big deal it is, but how long it's been going on, the long history of Iowa. I mean, Iowa was the state's been such a leader in that and offering these opportunities for females. And I think that's something that the state can be proud of, and certainly the girls union has been at the forefront of that. And that's why I can, I have the privilege of chairing on the Hall of Fame committees and and helping out at some state tournaments, and that's something I'll always value, because it's such a great organization and it's done so much good over decades, and putting the state on the map for something that other states, really had to scramble to catch up to.
I agree with that too, with what Chuck said, especially, growing up, we never thought of, whether I was playing on a team or watching a game. I mean, you never thought of one being lesser than the other. It was very much the same in some respects. It was actually, it was in Iowa, it was more focused on the girls, maybe the girls basketball, for example, than boys basketball. And you had the same amount of fans that would go to volleyball games. I mean, we just didn't know anything different. And when you talk about the Iowa girl, I think the other thing with Dr. Cooley was the Iowa girl was strong. And I think he was diverse from the standpoint of, in his eyes, it was someone that was not only involved in multi-sports, but also involved in multi-activities such as, the speech and music. In fact, Dr. Cooley was the first chair of the Iowa High School Speech Association, which is an organization that we continue to have in our offices. So it was not only promoting girls athletics, but also girls activities, and someone that's well balanced and well rounded, and not only is active in school, but active in the community, active in whether it's their church or in school activities or farm activities, agricultural, FFA. All of those things were all part of what the Iowa Girl is all about. And in fact, we have a scholarship for Dr. Cooley. We've had for a little over 25 years now. And I think one of the things that we honor the recipient of that is someone that is a well-rounded individual, has is an outstanding student, is an elite athlete, and also very involved with her community and things like that. So those are the things that we kind of look for that kind of best represent what the Iowa Girl is all about.
Personally, I know how much that scholarship program means, as I was a finalist my senior year of high school. It's great to see that program continue to serve Iowa girls. In the interest of time, I'd like to pivot to a final point about the future of the IGHSAU. What might we see in the future of the Girls Union, as well as why is it so important to maintain a focus on women's athletics?
Well, it just goes back to what the Girls Union has always done, is the support of girls athletics, and just to make sure that is always a critical, important thing, and that you were going to be given the same or maybe better opportunities. I don't know, that you would never be relegated to I won't say second class or or just another thing. It's it keeps the importance and the spotlight on girls athletics, and that's why I think it would always be valuable, because you have an organization looking out specifically for that area. And I would think if you were a high school athlete, a girl, you would want that. You would want to see that support continue.
And I would piggyback on that too. I mean, having been out of state for a couple of years right after college and seeing how state events are run, I mean, it was very, very shocking to me as someone just out of college. You assume that I assumed all girls tournaments were had sold out arenas and were treated like that, and not seeing that, living out of state for a couple of years, I learned just how important the Iowa Girl is. And that's really carried on to me in the last 23 years that I've worked here, is, we do give our undivided attention to the girl athlete and to our tournaments. We put 100% to do all the little things that make the Iowa girl feel special when they come to our tournaments. For many of the girls that are participating in our state tournaments, this is their real big moment to shine, and we want to make sure that our event is special to them. Not everyone is going to go on to play collegiately. This is their opportunity, or we look at it as their opportunity for them to shine. We want them to have the greatest experience possible, and that's going forward in the future. That's one of the things that we continue to do, is what can we do as an organization to make the Iowa girl that much better, and not just in athletics, but also in life going forward as well, as they go on to college or their careers. There are things that we can do, looking at different ways to make, whether it's recognizing someone on Twitter or just making the Iowa girl feel special. That's where we put 100% of our efforts as a staff into making things great, making the Iowa girl feel like they are a number one.
Yeah, exactly, Jason. Growing up, I had no idea about the struggle and the fight to even gain, be on the same playing field as boys athletics. I always had those opportunities presented to me, and I think it's greatly contributed to who I am as a person, and my character. So that's why I thought it was really be important to share the rich history of the Girls Union with our listeners. Any thoughts on where the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union will go in the future?
Well, I think there's a lot of different things that are out there. I mean, whether it's expanding opportunities, whether it's through additional sports. I mean, obviously there's a lot of activities out there that present itself, that girls are participating, whether it's through club sports that possibly could be sanctioned activities by us. There's also lots of different things as far as, I mean, we've done some initiatives with healthier lifestyles, promoting women's health. There's all different kinds of things, whether it's academic opportunities or athletic opportunities. There's always something new, and we want to make sure that we're looking at different opportunities to help the Iowa girl athlete, Iowa girl in general, I should say.
Yeah, and I would think there might even be additional opportunities to cooperate with High School Athletic Association, the boys group. I mean, we've seen how that's worked, particularly in the state track meet, which it was interesting when in the talks about combining the boys and the girls track meet, Dr. Cooley's, one of his biggest concerns with the boys is that the boys would outshine the girls at this meet, and it would look like the girls weren't as good. Well, as it turned out, we had people like the Dinsdale twins and the Flood sisters and Shelby Houlihan and Sarah Stokes and Hannah Wilms and Alex Schoffner. It was the other way around. I mean, it ushered in the golden age for girls high school track. And so I think, there might be areas down the road for further cooperation like that. Cross-country meet is that bowling, right, Jason? It's done.
Yes, that's a co-ed meet.
It's done cooperatively. And so there might be areas in the future where that could be done. We'll see. I mean, I don't think you should rule out the possibilities. You need to, and I think there are enough, there are forward-looking people in the union, and they'll consider everything on the table.
Absolutely.
Well, I know there's much more we could talk about. We'll have to save that for another time. I'd like to thank our guests, Jason Eslinger of the IGHSAU and renowned sports writer, Chuck Schoffner, for joining me today as we discussed the history of the Girls Union. We'll take a quick break and return to close our first episode here on the all-new Girls Union podcast. Please stay with us.
Runners, to your mark. Set.
Some may see a sprinter. At the NFHS, we see a future leader already off to the races. Some may see a volleyball player.
Good hit! Way to go, girls! Woo!
At the NFHS, we see a spike in confidence that will help her achieve her potential. What else do we see? Musicians learning to march to their own beat. We're the NFHS, the national leader and advocate for high school athletics and activities in America, helping today's teenagers develop the skills they need to become tomorrow's leaders. And we see it happening in communities across Iowa every single day. Learn more about the NFHS commitment to youth at nfhs.org. This message presented by the NFHS, the National Federation of State High School Associations.
Today's episode is brought to you by Kruger Seeds. The next time you're in need of corn or soybean seed, give your local Kruger Seeds dealer a call. Kruger Seeds first-class seed first-name service. Learn more at krugerseed.com. By Buena Vista University. Located in Storm Lake, Iowa, Buena Vista University prepares students for lifelong success through transformational academic, professional, and co-curricular programs. Learn more today at bvu.edu. and by Casey's General Stores. Casey's is at the heart of many Iowa communities, cheering on our local teams and fans and making sure there's fresh pizza ready, win or lose. Sign up for the new Casey's Rewards, the rewards program that gives back by letting you redeem points for Casey's cash, fuel discounts, or donations to your local school. And welcome back. You're listening to the all-new Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union podcast. Back with Meredith Cunningham, I'm Tom Florian. And Meredith, that was a great interview with Jason and Chuck.
Yeah, I think it really helped illustrate how special and unique women's athletics are in Iowa and how supportive the state of Iowa is of women in athletics. I know we could have spent hours talking about the growth of women's sports in Iowa and the legacy of Dr. Wayne Cooley, but we'll have to come back to that in a future episode.
Definitely. The legacy of Dr. Wayne Cooley continues to shine as the Iowa girl continues to make herself shine as a student, an athlete, and a member of her community. Now, there's so many tremendous stories of Iowa girls giving back to her community, especially as we find ourselves in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, over the last few weeks, we've shared a few of the many faces on the front lines, student athletes who are working at our grocery stores and retail stores, to all the families in agriculture who continue to work and ensure that our food supply chain remains full, the student athletes who are working in the healthcare industry, and so many more, and to all the Iowa girls who are serving their communities by organizing food drives, sewing masks, and so much more. We can't thank you all enough. If you all have the chance to check out our social media pages, we've had the opportunity to share the stories of some of these incredible Iowa girls and the work that they're doing, so we do encourage you all to check that out. And before we close our first show, we know this has been a tough spring, especially for our athletes in spring sports, and in particular, the senior class of 2020. Meredith, perhaps you can talk about how the IGHSAU and the IHSAA are celebrating our seniors during the month of May.
You bet, Tom. Throughout the month of May, athletes, coaches, administrators, and parents are encouraged to share their favorite memories, photos, words of encouragement, and more about their senior student athletes on Twitter and Instagram using IAHS Seniors. By using this hashtag, all posts that are visible to the public will be featured on a social media platform created by the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union and the IHSAA. The link to the wall can be found on our website, ighsau.org. We've already seen hundreds of fantastic posts about the class of 2020 and look forward to sharing countless more stories throughout the month. Again, when posting, be sure to use IAHS Seniors.
That's excellent stuff, Meredith. It's been a treat to see the impact that these student athletes have had on their school, community, and team. And we look forward to seeing many more highlights in the coming weeks. Well, folks, that's going to do it for our first show. As always, we ask that you follow the IGHSAU on all of your social media accounts, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. That way you can stay up to date on the latest information and highlights of the Iowa Girl. And if you have a story or interview ideas that you'd like to hear on a future podcast, please feel free to email us at podcast@ighsau.org. Again, that email address is podcast@ighsau.org. Again, we'd like to thank our guests, Chuck Schoffner and Jason Eslinger, our support staff over at the IGHSAU, and all of our listeners for tuning in today. On behalf of Meredith Cunningham, I'm Tom Florian. You've been listening to the all-new Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union podcast. We look forward to having you back for another show soon. Take care and stay well.